So we're out in San Diego this week. We flew out on Monday to our new favorite airport, which is the Burbank Airport, just north of LA. It's 15 minutes from downtown LA, but it's like this small town airport from the town of Mayberry in Andy Griffith. It's got one level, arrivals and departures. It's not like you go up or down an elevator or anything. It's one level. So when you get there to drop off your bags, you can park right there in front of the terminal, and nobody messes with you. Go in, check in, drop your bags off, and then go park your car. When you get ready to take off, you walk out onto the tarmac, and they've got a staircase up against the plane. It's just like back in the day. It's very, very neat. And you're not parking 20 minutes away, taking a shuttle bus or anything like that, waiting 2 hours to get through security. I can't believe everybody doesn't fly out of there. You can actually save a lot of money. They got great prices, and it seems like nobody knows about it. It's like hidden there in the middle of, again, Burbank, just outside LA. And after flying in and out of there a few times, there is no way we would ever use LAX ever again. We prefer to fly into San Diego because we do most of our business down here in this part of Southern California, but a lot of times you can't get a flight out of San Diego for less than, $750 round trip. All those pandemic low fares are long gone. We noticed back in the late fall, like November, December, it was starting to get busy, and as of early March, yeah, the airplanes were filling right up. The airports were packed. Places like Las Vegas, absolutely packed full of people. If you've been to the Strip recently. And Delta just stopped leaving the middle seats open. So yeah, even on Delta, which was the last holdout, you're packed in there like sardines again, and you're paying full fares. But again, into and out of Burbank, it's really, really cheap, and it's the most convenient airport in the world if you fly into the LA region. Anyway, we're driving up to Riverside area today, and we got the usual Southern California traffic. If you notice, the road we're on is the blue one. Off to our right, just to our east, maybe a couple hundred feet, is I-15, and it is bumper to bumper. So Google Maps sent us on this detour, which was nice of it. And the big news today, or in the last day or two, is that Ford has come out with a name for their electric pickup, and it's going to be called the F150 Lightning, which continues the trend which we saw in the Mustang Mach-E, where they are naming their electric vehicles after their more popular legacy internal combustion vehicles. And so the Mach-E, a lot of us thought that was a gimmick to name it after the Mustang, and a lot of us still do. But, who are we to question Ford's marketing decisions? Because between them and maybe Apple and maybe a couple other companies, Ford knows what the hell they're doing with marketing. They are absolutely brilliant when it comes to marketing. If you were alive in the 80s, and you remember the best-selling car for most of the 80s, it was the Ford Escort, which was an absolute piece of junk. But Ford knew how to sell that vehicle. And it was the best-selling car in the world, practically. So far be it from us to question Ford's marketing decisions. And if they want to call their imitation Model Y Tesla the Mustang Mach-E, well then, they must know that that's a good idea. And if they want to call the electric F-150 the Lightning, that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. It's kind of got that cute little tie-in with electricity. Anyway, We talked about it at length maybe a month or a month and a half ago as to all the reasons why we think an electric pickup truck is an exceptionally bad idea. And we stand behind everything we said, because for what we do, which is we drive thousands and thousands of miles each month, usually 50 or 60,000 miles a year, at least. Just in this truck, we've gone 7,500 plus in about 6 weeks of owning it. Which is whatever that is. More than 1,000 miles per week. And we do a lot of long road trips. And we spend a lot of time away from home and away from the office. And so the problem with an EV, when you're doing that kind of driving, an electric vehicle, is that you don't know if there's going to be charging at your hotel or at your destination, wherever you're going. And if you're going, 200, 300, 500, 800 miles in a day, you are definitely going to have to stop multiple times per day and charge the vehicle for 30 or 40 or 50 or minutes or longer. And so that's when you run into trouble with an electric pickup truck, because unlike a car like the Tesla, which is extremely aerodynamic and is optimized to save energy and to be as efficient as possible, a pickup truck is the exact opposite of an efficient aerodynamic vehicle. And so the Tesla, the current Model S, which has a 100 kilowatt hour battery, can go, I think its rated EPA range is 402 miles for the Model S from, the 2020 at least, or the 2021. 402 miles on an electric battery that is a 100 kilowatt hour battery. And that's a very big, very heavy battery. It uses something like 300 watt hours per mile, or about 0.3 kilowatt hours of electricity per mile. And so the problem when you take a pickup truck and make it into an EV is that it's not going to be anywhere near as efficient as a car because of aerodynamic drag. So instead of 300 watt hours per mile, or 0.3 kilowatt hours per mile, it's going to be using maybe twice as much, 0.6 of a kilowatt hour per mile, if it's shaped the way a normal pickup truck is, like this one. And we haven't heard any indications to the effect that the electric F-150 will be in any way streamlined or improved in its aerodynamics compared to a regular F-150. So it might use double the electricity of an electric car. So again, maybe 600 or 700 or 800 watt hours per mile. And you say, okay, what does that even mean? Why should I care? Well, if it's using almost 1 kilowatt hour per mile, and say it has the same battery as a Tesla, 100 kilowatt hours, that means it's not going to get more than maybe 150 miles out of that battery. Even, if you're using the entire battery from 100% down to 0% of charge, and you're not supposed to use the entire battery. You're only supposed to use around from 80% down to 20%, not 100 down to 0. So you're only using the middle 60% of the battery. So you've only got 60 kilowatt hours at your disposal.
In 600 feet, slight right toward Old Highway 395.
And if you bear with me, if you only got 60 kilowatt hours to play with in terms of battery capacity, and you're using almost a full kilowatt hour per mile, well, do the math. That means you have somewhere between 60 miles of range and maybe 100 miles of range. And you say, okay, well, Ford is going to double it and put a 200 kilowatt hour battery in. Okay, so now you have maybe 120 miles to maybe 200 miles of range. If you've got double the electric battery of a Tesla. And I seriously doubt Ford is going to put a battery that big into an electric F-150 without it being a $100,000 vehicle. And so that's kind of the laws of physics that Ford is up against. And maybe they've discovered some magical solution to this problem. But at least with the Mustang Mach-E, they have not. And that has a similar size battery to the Tesla. It's got similar aerodynamics, maybe not quite as good as the Model Y, which is like the closest competitor. And so as a result, it's got pretty average range for an electric vehicle. 250, 300 miles of range. And that's for a much more aerodynamic vehicle than a pickup truck. That is for the Mach-E. So again, unless Ford has revolutionized battery technology or revolutionized aerodynamics, we're not sure how the math works out in terms of the range of the vehicle. Now, maybe they're counting on the fact that, well, some fleet owners and some private owners only drive 100 miles a day, or only drive 60 or 80 miles a day. And if that's the case, okay, go for it. Buy an electric pickup truck that you're going to have to charge in full every single night when you get done with it for an hour or two. And that's at a very, very high charging speed. That's at like the charging speed of a Tesla
Slight
supercharger.
right toward Old Highway 395, then slight right onto Old Highway 395.
Looks like we got a convoy of National Guard or maybe Marines. Yeah, those look like Marine 8-ton trucks.
Slight right onto Old Highway 395.
But yeah, it's just a tough position that Ford is in, trying to have a go at it with a fully electric pickup truck, given the laws of physics when it comes to the
Head northwest
aerodynamics.
on Old Highway 395, then turn right to stay on Old Highway 395.
God, that's annoying. When it comes to the aerodynamics of a truck and when it comes to the life of a battery. Now check this out. You notice our mileage for this trip, it's 20.4, and we've gone exactly 20.4 miles. So, of which 4 are electric. You notice that? And where it says 4.1 electric miles, that means the engine is completely off, and it's either coasting, or it's being propelled by electric power, or it's being slowed down by electric braking. So, out of 20 miles we've driven during this trip, which is 45 minutes long, you see how slow we're going through Southern California traffic. 4 of those 20 miles, which is a full 20%, are pure electric. And that's not bad, to be honest. We're also noticing, again, for our MPG on this trip, as the truck gets broken in, you see we're over 7,500 miles now. The mileage, the MPGs are creeping up. In the first probably 2,000 or 3,000 miles that we own this truck, we got in the upper teens in terms of trip mileage. Whether it was in the city, whether it was on the highway, whether it was half and half. This thing got miles per gallon that were in the teens. And then around the 5,000 mile mark, maybe 6,000 miles, it started creeping up. And now at 7,600, we are routinely seeing
Head northeast
20
toward
plus.
Old Highway 395, then slight right onto Old Highway 395.
God, that's annoying.
Slight right onto Old Highway 395. In 1,000 feet, turn left onto the I-15 North ramp.
And so yeah,
Turn left onto the I-15 North ramp.
the truck is getting broken in and the MPGs are creeping up. It's not as if we're driving it any differently. We do not drive this thing to save gas. We drive it to get down the road. But just with any engine, as it gets broken in, you see a slight increase in power, slight improvement in acceleration, and as we're seeing now, a slight increase in gas mileage. And that's kind of neat. And so, you know, we remain unimpressed by the idea of an electric F-150 because of the fact that we do as much driving as we do, the fact that we wind up in so many different places, and we're not like a typical fleet owner where it's a delivery truck that runs a specific route every day and then winds up back at the office or back at the warehouse, and you can charge it all night. right, getting on the
In a quarter
I-15.
mile, merge onto I-15 North.
Which is surprisingly clear this afternoon. Although who knows how long that's going to last. It's actually a pretty drive leaving out of San Diego and going north on I-15. It's a completely different drive than you would get if you were going up
I-15 North for 12 miles.
Going up I-5 right along the coast, which we've also done many, many times. But you get a lot of elevation change. You're going through valleys and up and down mountains. And
there's a 16-minute slowdown caused by construction in 5 miles. You are still on the fastest route.
Of course, there's a 16-minute delay. But yeah, again, unless Ford reveals something breathtaking and some amazing new invention that has revolutionized battery technology, which we doubt, and revolutionized pickup truck aerodynamics, which we also doubt, we're just not seeing it in terms of the so-called value proposition of an electric F-150. We got no issues with electric vehicles as a concept, and Tesla has done a very good job making their electric cars work for most people. We've got a Model S and we drive the hell out of it, and we've gone cross-country with it, which we probably won't do again anytime soon. But, you know, it works for the average vehicle owner, because something like the Model S has, again, 400 miles of range, EPA rated. And if you're only using the middle 6%, that's still around 250 miles. That's 3 to 4 hours of driving at highway speeds, and then you stop and you hit the supercharger for 30, 40, 50 minutes and get back on the road. And you can do that for you can get pretty far driving 4 hours and then charging for a half an hour or an hour and then getting back on the road. That's what the current Model S. The new one, the refreshed version, which still hasn't actually shipped yet. It was announced maybe 6 months ago, and they said it would be shipping in the spring, and nobody has seen their new 2021 Plaid or Plaid Plus Model S. That supposedly has 520 miles of range, but for most people, 400 miles is all you need. 300 miles is all you need for most people, because most people just drive their car to work in the morning, drive it home in the afternoon, and they're done. And so for the average person, the Tesla we have, which only has 260 miles of rated, EPA rated range, 260 miles is enough for most people, because that gets you about 150 miles of useful range before you get to charge it. And that's, 75 miles out, 75 miles back in temperate weather. And then in cold weather, you lose around 30% of that. But the average person is not doing anywhere near as much driving as we are, which, like I said, is thousands and thousands of miles every month to all kinds of different locations. And you say, okay, well, so what? The average F-150 owner maybe drives 100 miles a day at the absolute most. So why should they care about anything you're saying? Okay, fine. If you drive 100 miles a day, great. Get an electric F-150. Pay that huge price that you know you're going to be paying, which we will be shocked if it's anything below $70,000. More like 80. And have at it. And don't let us talk you out of it. But then what's going to happen during the weekend or during a holiday when you want to take a road trip and see the family 500 or 1,000 miles down the road? What's going to happen is that you can't take that F-150 with you. Or what's going to happen if you have any amount of towing to do? Towing will kill your range faster than you could possibly imagine. Because it takes a truck that will consume something like 0.6 to 0.8 of a kilowatt hour per mile, and it makes it more like 1.5 kilowatt hours per mile. And then you're lucky to get maybe 60 miles of range out of that F-150, assuming it has a 100 kilowatt hour battery. Let's just assume that it has that big of a battery. When you're towing any size of a trailer, your boat or a travel trailer or a utility trailer load up with who knows what, yeah, you're getting maybe 60 miles of range. And then you got to charge for an hour. So you're charging it as much as you're driving it. And so, you know, once again, don't let us talk you out of it. If you are obsessed with the idea of an electric pickup truck, but we're just not seeing it. Now, Tesla, the big unknown is the Tesla Cybertruck, which is also coming out in the next year or so. And we say year or so because Tesla's delivery schedule frequently tends to slip. But that didn't happen with the Model Y. They said it was shipping sometime last year, and it was shipping spring of last year. Same thing with the Model 3. They had to do backflips to get that thing out the door, but they did start shipping it eventually, and now they're doing hundreds of thousands a year against all expectations. And so yeah, it may or may not ship as soon as they get that factory open up in the Austin area. And we'll see how that thing does in terms of range. Tesla right now has the best battery technology, and they make some of the most aerodynamic and most efficient vehicles in existence that have ever been made. And so, you know, maybe the Cybertruck will work, and if it does, that's great. But we don't ever plan to get one because, again, we do so much long-distance driving, much of it with a trailer, that a Cybertruck is never going to work for us. What we really, really wish somebody would do is take something like this, which is the hybrid F-150, which is a very good first attempt, and maybe make it with a bigger hybrid battery, as we've said many, many times, and not just a 1.5 kilowatt hour, but how about 10, or how about 20? We don't even need a 50 kilowatt hour battery, but even 10 or 20 would take your 20-ish miles to the gallon, and it would make it 25 or 30 at least, because of the fact that it would allow you to drive so many more electric miles than you can right now. With this tiny little battery, out of 27 miles driven, 5.5 have been all electric. So do the math. You make a battery 10 times bigger, say 15 kilowatt hours, you could be doing at least double as much electric driving as you can right now. And you never have to plug it in because it's got an onboard generator in the form of a conventional engine that will keep it charged all the time. And that, in our minds, is the ideal electrified pickup truck. Something like what we have right now, but with a bigger electric battery, which would mean a much stronger rear axle, something like the 7,700 pound GVW that they used to make in the F-150 in the late 90s when it first came out. They had we saw one just the other day. It said F-150 7,700 on the badge on the back of it. This thing has, I think, a 7,350 GVW. If you added 350 more pounds to the rear axle rating on it, it would have no trouble holding a much bigger battery. And that would be the perfect electric pickup truck. One small thing we're going to mention, we talked a lot in the last week or so about how much better the Tesla is in heavy traffic with autopilot compared to Ford with the driver assistance package, which is adaptive cruise control and lane keeping and lane centering. Mostly because the Tesla is a lot better at looking further into the traffic, looking not just one, but maybe 2 or 3 vehicles ahead of you, and catching on to the fact that traffic is slowing down up ahead of you and reacting quicker. And so it's not quite as dramatic as we would have you believe. I mean, the Ford isn't stupid. It can pick up on changes in the traffic pattern, but it's just not quite as good as the Tesla in that respect. And again, you do find yourself having to slam on the brakes a decent amount in the Ford. Or the truck itself realizes late in the game what's going on, and the truck gets on the brakes kind of hard. And so what we really wish this thing would do a little bit more of is use electric braking with its 50 horsepower motor to slow it down instead of using the mechanical brakes. It doesn't really do that much electric braking, at least as far as we can tell. But the other problem is that the drivetrain itself does have a little bit of slop in it, otherwise known as slack, otherwise known as windup. And so when you're accelerating, it is highly, highly responsive. You put your foot down and it goes. But when you want to slow down and you lift off, it does not make that transition very quickly. And so, you know, you just kind of feel all that mechanical inertia in the drivetrain. And, you know, whereas the Tesla, if you're on the gas and you're going 80, the instant you let off the gas, in less than a second, it goes into full regen braking mode, extremely seamlessly and aggressively. And so you don't have to wait for it to start slowing itself down. And that's extremely noticeable compared to the F-150, which is going to want to coast and then going to want to slowly make up its mind as to what's going on up ahead of you. And it's very noticeable that this thing is much, much slower on the draw than the F-150. Sorry, than the Tesla. And that transition between full forward acceleration and engine braking or deceleration, again, in the Tesla, it's like a light switch. And in this thing, it's kind of like that. The Tesla is like full power, full regen, and this thing is like full power. So in terms of development and refinement, they could have done a little more with that. You know, we're not going to complain that much. It's just something you notice. But it's a hell of a lot better than nothing. It's a hell of a lot better than nothing. Anyway, so that's the news. We'll see what happens on, I think, May 18th when the official reveal takes place for the so-called Lightning F150 Lightning electric pickup. And we'll be very excited to hear what kind of numbers it has and what kind of battery life and what kind of aerodynamics and performance it has. Anyway, thanks everyone. We will talk to you again soon.